What's up guys, Ben here bringing another video today. I'm going to recap my thoughts from all 12 teams from the weekend, but before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit about this weekend. So as you can see, I'm in a beautiful hotel room here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I want to thank everyone that stopped by this weekend to our setup at the event. I want to shout out Activision, Esports Engine, all of the other sort of supporting vendors that helped us build our booth, operate things this weekend. Shout out to those folks, Tommy, Chris, and Pat for stopping by and being a part of something awesome. We want to run it back each and every event this year, so I'm excited for that. Shout out to my boy Jaden. Shout out to my boy Gersh for all their help throughout the weekend. Bepsy for the setup. Everybody at FaZe Clan that helped us get everything done on the logistical end. Those folks are the GOATs. Trying to think if there's anybody else. I forgot all of the fans. I think I already thanked them, but we'll thank them again. And then all of our guests that came by. We had a lot of guests from players, coaches, people at Activision. We had Daniel Sai hop by. We had people from Esports Engine hop by. We had people not even working on Call of Duty stopping by. So that was awesome. Actually, probably my favorite guest the whole weekend was the guys and gals from the HBCU school in Charlotte coming by talking about their esports team. Like, that was awesome. So want to run that back at every event. All right, let's dive in. We're going to start with the team at the top. That's the New York Subliners, walking away with first place at this event. I mean, what a win for these boys. You know, I think they all came into the weekend with sort of different chips on their shoulder. Obviously, Paco and kids kind of dealing with all of the BS from the offseason. You had Skies coming over from a Florida team that, you know, they were competitive for 2 years, but they weren't really winning anything. You had obviously Preston coming over, Priestley coming over from that RØKKR team that also, outside that crazy, you know, best of 9 win they had, that crazy run at Major 5 in Cold War, like they really weren't that good most of the other years. So, you know, people were calling for him to be dropped, to be out of the league, for him to play as well as he played this weekend. That's awesome. These guys really mastered where this meta sort of ended up this weekend. And I know, you know, there was a patch and they didn't play on it, and this may change, you know, this week when people get home and play on the new version of the game. But I gotta shout out these guys for really feeling out, getting ahead of everybody. They look like the best respawn team this weekend. They were pretty good in search as well. Massive shout out to these guys. And the last thing I want to say is I talked to D-Real and Sender. We talked to him on our set on Sunday, and I talked to him a little bit last night as well. And I think both of them made a very concerted effort to really improve the team culture after all of the BS they've had the last couple of years. And I think it's paid off with this event win now for the boys. All right, next up we have the Seattle Surge. And they got second place, lost to New York pretty handily in the grand finals. But they get a nice win against FaZe on the weekend. I thought Seattle played particularly well this weekend. I think their S&D is probably where they need to work on the most, and they had some good S&D wins again. They beat FaZe in a game 5, which I thought was extremely tippable. You know, at times I thought Pred was doing his thing, Mac doing his thing, although at times was a little bit inconsistent in the beginning of the week, and I think he figured it out more as we got to Saturday and Sunday. Lamar had some Lamar series, but, you know, it's to be expected. He fills a specific role on this team, and, you know, he does it pretty well. And obviously Dante was frying. So I like the Seattle team. They really did a good job in what we thought was sort of a crowded mid-pack of 8 or 9 teams, really kind of standing out. And I like, again, their prospects throughout the year. Let's see if they can consistently get these top 3s and top 4s, though. Because last year, you know, they had placings like this, but then they had placings where they got, you know, top 8. So let's see what they can do. All right, next up we have the Atlanta FaZe. And I think they feel good probably about this weekend, but if you're an Atlanta FaZe fan, you know, this team's a little weird to me right now in the sense of they're definitely a good team. Picking up Slasher has made their search way better. I mean, they were probably the best S&D team this weekend outside of, you know, the game 5 against Seattle. Probably they want back. But I think the respawns were not quite there on Sunday. And, you know, this has been kind of a running problem a bit for this team, really since like Kickoff Classic Major 1 last year. They do a really good job at these events playing good the first couple of days, and then when the championship Sunday rolls around, the competition gets a little bit harder. They have some issues. All 4 of the players on the team don't fry. They don't all come in, you know, in 100% mindset. So I think that's what they need to work on, because I like where this team can go. I like their potential. Obviously last year they were like a shoe-in to in the grand finals at every event, and I'm still picking them to probably be the likely team making it the grand finals this year at champs, considering that Simp and Abizi have been to the last 4 of them. But they got to figure out this Sunday problem if they want to try and win an event this year. All right, we got the Toronto Ultra, who finished 4th on Sunday, and a good showing from the boys. I thought, you know, we've talked up this team a lot and their potential, and, you know, is Scrappy going to be the real deal? Sandy, again, also like Preston coming off that Minnesota team that wasn't playing particularly good. And these guys definitely showed out. I think at one point, probably on Friday, a lot of people probably had them winning the event. And I think, you know, they kind of slowed down a little bit when it got to the weekend, but that's okay. I really like where this team can go. They were solid, I think, across all game modes. I think even if the meta kind of shifts, I really like what this team can land because there's a lot of flexibility between, Standy, Scrappy, and Kleenex and what they can do on a sort of sub AR kind of split if it's 2-2-3-1. I think I feel more comfortable after this weekend feeling like they're a top 4 team, at least at the moment, and they definitely placed that way. A good start for the boys, and I expect them to probably make it to a grand finals at some point this year. Now we're getting to kind of the top 6 teams, and I think, again, for these 2 squads, I think for Thieves and Vegas, I think there's a lot to like and definitely a lot to work on for both these teams. So let's talk about it. So for LA Thieves, I think the biggest issue for them this weekend was slaying, and we saw this earlier on last year. They've got good teamwork, they've got good chemistry, but I think the meta this weekend was very quick, and I don't know if they were very fast to adjust their tactics to it. And in general, like, their slaying wasn't particularly amazing throughout the weekend. I think they'll work on it. But I think that's what really limited their ceiling, because they look like they have a mastery of, again, all 3 game modes. I thought they're still a good S&D team as well, but the slaying wasn't there this weekend. They were able to get out of groups, but not good enough to deal with, New York, Seattle, FaZe, Toronto quad and try and make it a championship Sunday. And then the other team here, Vegas, I think is extremely typical if you think about it, them getting top 6 of this event. And I think it speaks towards really the dedication, their hard work this team has done in the event prior to this. I talked a little bit to Temp on Saturday, and he felt like there's still a lot they need to work on that front still, but he was very happy with their placing. That being said, with Vegas though, I still think their slaying is something that they're gonna need to work on. They got a really, really good weekend at times from TJ and ProLoop, but I don't know how often that's going to happen considering the caliber of the talent in the league. But I feel good that this team is going to be like a top 6, top 8 contender all season. And for me, them being in the mix to make it to a champ spot is a massive improvement from what we've seen over the past Legion teams. And I think they've already won more matches in this weekend, this last couple of weeks, and they have all last season. So shout out to those boys, a lot to build on. So our next 2 teams are Florida and RØKKR. And, both of these teams kind of exited early on the bracket portion of the event. They were kind of out of things by the end of Friday. And I think they're both kind of, one I would say is probably less disappointing than the other. So let's dive in on that. We're going to start with the one that I think are probably feeling the better of the 2, which is Florida. Because I think that this team is very much a work in progress. And they felt that way at times, like, really inconsistent slaying. But they were grinding out series, grinding out like S&Ds. I have a long-term view in mind with this squad. Talent is still maybe in slaying, consistent slaying might be a question mark in terms of them matching other teams, but this looks like the Florida teams we've seen in the past. They're going to grind out top 8s, a good showing, rookie showing for Vickle. Obviously, coming to an event like this, first big CDL event, is always tricky. I thought Brack played well coming back. He lost a couple of key fun gunfights across some maps on this weekend, but again, good showing from him. Mike had a couple of good maps. Havoc was playing good on land. I like the Florida team. Top 8's not too bad. Something to build upon. We're getting to kind of the next, when we talk about RØKKR, I think every other CDL team sort of this and after probably feel like they mega disappointed this weekend. I think RØKKR is probably one, even though they got out of groups, they were, out of the bracket instantly. And, for the amount of money they spent for this team, for them to look this pedestrian once again, and considering all the players that they dropped, like Priesta and Sandy on teams that did well this weekend, like, this situation is very puzzling to me because once again we look at this RØKKR team and the hard point just wasn't there, and we've said the same thing about this team time and time again. I swear since COVID really started in the middle of the Modern Warfare year, and to be honest, they haven't made any improvement in it, and I can't figure out if it's they're just getting unlucky with the personnel or systemically the way they want to play hardpoint just doesn't match how things need to be. And they need to rethink in hardpoint because they're going to fall behind. Look, top 8 still puts them in terms of point spots like in the champs placings, because last year they were 20 points short of getting there, but they got to improve on top 8. I will say though, there's potential with this team. Afro is disgusting. Dylan played really well at times. Get a little bit more consistently out of Ben and Cam on the slaying front. This team can go places, but they got to figure out this hardpoint man, or it's going to be getting more of these top 8s. All right, now we're talking about the teams that didn't make it out of groups, and there's a lot of disappointments here, so let's talk about them. First up, we've got the LAG boys that basically got bounced in a very uncompetitive 3-0 after Code Bowl on Friday. They were struggling online prior to this event, and it's not a surprise they pulled up and really weren't playing them that well. Either when they got here, hardpoint, they look like maybe the worst hardpoint team in the league right now, which is definitely, tough to say, considering the talent they have on their team. This team's got to make a very tough decision, which is, I think you can't in your right mind at this point say that the Neptune Hook and Sport trio is working. Like, we've seen too many events of it now that they clearly aren't competitive enough that if you run it back at this point, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. So this team's going to make a change, I feel like, because right now they're not competitive to the rest of the league. So let's see what they do prior to New Year's. But a poor showing from them, and I know they got one series in, to make it to Friday, but they didn't even look a threat, and they were out of there in 30 minutes after their first match on Friday. All right, let me now address the team that I think y'all probably want me to talk about most. That's OpTic Texas. I mean, they ran into the Florida buzzsaw. Are we gonna call it that? Like, they have a weird mental block, it seems like, against this team. Every time Florida plays OpTic, they turn into like some different team than they are. But I think in general, even taking the Florida series aside, I don't think OpTic's played like the kind of COD that would have gotten them really to Sunday to begin with. I think they're the amount of times that they have blown rounds in S&D this week, that 2-5 that they blew is really bad. They definitely look like the most under-practiced team, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them, Ilya had COVID, Shotzi had COVID, they just switched facilities at one point. They've just been dealing with a lot of BS, and I also think they started scrimming a lot later than some of the teams. So, like, in general, they got to catch back up, which is tough to say after the first event. To me, I think, again, we talk about the 4 teams that placed top 4 at this event and how fast they played. I think OpTic's going to need to kind of match that pace, especially if this meta is kind of similar, even with the patch that came through on Friday that they didn't play on. I mean, we just need to see Inder and Bruce probably play a little bit more at pace with Ant, because to me, they're going to be their best sort of ceiling, is if they can kind of figure out how to work best around Ant and Seth. Like, this team's going to excel. If they're going to kind of have this sort of disconnect in thinking like they had at the end of last year, like, we're going to keep talking about the team being a disappointment. So let's see what they do, because I think Major 2 is a critical time for them. If they're still struggling before Major 3, the team might make a roster change. All right, and we're going to finally finish this off with the 2 teams that went 0-2 this weekend. I think one of them is probably making a roster change. The other one, it was a bit of a weird situation. So London Royal Ravens have been an absolute roller coaster. Looked great the first week of the CDL. M4GA comes in. They look terrible the second week of the CDL. And they pulled this event and just were completely uncompetitive. I think the only silver lining for this team is that Asim's playing really, really well, which, Asim's my boy, and he's been really inconsistent at times over the years, but they wasted a good major cycle from him, considering, again, how good the sub players were playing at this event. I don't know what's going on there. I always thought this team was going to be kind of iffy in terms of start, just from sort of the kind of mix of talent. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to already make a change with the squad, because, outside of that good quick start, like, they haven't looked on the level of some of the other squads. They're sitting in, not really coming away with any CDL points this weekend, so they're already behind the 8 ball in terms of champs qualification. And I've kind of talked to people around the camp and people around the league, and I think this team probably needs to kind of jumpstart their season a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if they make a roster change on that front. Boston was a weird one for me. They were looking decent online. Obviously didn't have a great second week of the CDL after their killer start the first week. And they pulled up this event, and I guess Big Wake wasn't feeling well, so they were really, really struggling on the first day of the event, and they got bounced. I don't know what to take away from it, because I felt like if they could have gotten over that, like, especially with the way this game played this weekend, like, they would have been there or thereabouts, because I think Nero and Vivid would have been having. So probably a missed opportunity for them, really. I still like this Breach team. I don't know what the deal with Big Wake is. We haven't seen much in the way of what was he sick with and all that, but maybe just an anomaly event for Boston. Maybe you just chalk it up and move on. Keep working on your practice. I still like this team and where they're at, but let's see how they do the first couple of online weeks. If maybe they're still struggling, we might need to think up our thinking. Last, I want to touch a little bit on some of the academy teams and challengers teams and how they did it in the pro bracket. So LAG Academy and Elevate got pretty deep, but they both got bounced on Friday afternoon. LAG Academy ended up actually winning the entire open bracket for this event, and they definitely look very good. So when we talk about the LAG situation and roster changes, and I'll cover that in a video later this week, you might be seeing a couple of people changing hands between those rosters, maybe. I don't know. It's a bit of an interesting situation. Thought Elevate looked good this weekend. Giz and Harry were doing their thing on lane. Vortex, Denza. I like that team. Again, came up just short on Friday, but a lot of potential there for some of the guys who are ex-pros. So we'll see if maybe they can find their way onto some CDL rosters, again, pending their visa situation, because they are European. And, we had 2 other challenger squads that didn't make it to the final day of groups. We have also got Haggie's team, which is Decimate Gaming. They played fine. I mean, they were not as talented as some of these other challenger squads, and I think it really showed. But it was a good experience for them. They did a good job qualifying and had a decent showing. And the Polydrome guys, the Spanish guys, I'm always a big supporter of Juan and those guys. And they looked decent. Again, another European team that I think will probably do a good job throughout that region this year. I think the only thing, again, that's probably holding these players back is their ability to speak English. I mean, that's really all the CDL teams speak English. Like, that's how it goes. So yeah, that'll do it for this video, guys. Just my quick thoughts. I'm gonna roll out more kind of recap content sort of this week. We'll probably do a tier list at some point. We'll talk about roster moves. We'll talk about where the meta's at once people start practicing on the new patch, which, by the way, they played on in Challengers this weekend, but for the CDL players, they didn't. So they're not really gonna get hands on until they all fly back like today and start playing tomorrow. So we'll get that covered for you on this channel. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Like and subscribe. I'll be streaming a bunch this week. I don't know what yet. I haven't quite figured out my streaming stuff, but we'll get that sorted before the holiday weekend. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the next one.